Good Friday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Jesse Simonton, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price. I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us. Plenty to jump into and talk about regarding this football team. It's 0-2, looking for their first win coming up Saturday at noon as Chattanooga comes to town. The big news of the week to start the week and to start this podcast to talk about is Bryce Thompson's reemergence on the practice field. Jeremy Pruitt issuing a statement that a plan was in place that would help Bryce Thompson, he believes, and Bryce Thompson's been back allowed on the practice field. Not going to play at this point this week. We saw him on the practice field, guys running, second or third team, back of the line type deal. But how important is it for Tennessee to get Bryce Thompson on the practice field? Even though we don't know when he's going to play, how big of a deal is it to get him back out there?
I think it's the first step, towards, him kind of emerging back, as a factor on the football team. At least I didn't think he was just going to go off and then boom, he's in the lineup. I thought there was going to be this kind of natural, kind of getting into the pool at the steps and wading into the water type thing. And to me, this is kind of exactly going how I thought.
Well, and Jesse, he can't. I don't think there's any way you can play him until the court situation is remedied, and we know he doesn't go to court until after the Florida game on that Tuesday, the 23rd. So it's hard to see. You don't want as an 0-2 football team to be the narrative that you let this guy back on the field this week to play when he has a domestic assault, albeit verbal, but a charge still hanging out there that's not been done.
Yeah, it sounds like he has done what the football staff and the university maybe has asked him to do, which allowed him, I guess, the quote-unquote step that Austin's talking about is, all right, you can participate in team activities again. And that means you're back in the weight room, back on the practice field. And so the next hurdle he has to clear is the actual court date and what comes out of that, and then you have the bye week, and we'll see. It certainly seems like the earliest he's going to be back on the field, if he does return to the field, is the Georgia game.
Because, in this situation, the way I look at it is it's not just the athletic side, it's the university too. To me, the first kind of small step was him being able to go back to class. He's been going to class. Now the first step in the athletic side is him coming back to practice. So,
but he's not coming back to practice without approval from the university.
Correct.
Side. It's all been on the university side from the time the arrest was made.
No, I understand.
It was out of Jeremy Pruitt's hands.
Yes, but I'm just saying, like, you got kind of, while it is, the athletics is under the umbrella of the university, my thought, though, is if he was going to class, that's why I've always kind of felt like at some point he was going to end up back on the football team because he was going to class.
Right, but my point, yes, I see what you're saying. The university deemed him not a threat to the campus, which is why they let him go to class.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to go with a police escort and those types of things. They let him go be a regular student. And now, as Jeremy Pruitt, Rob said in his statement, that plan in place that he believes will help Bryce Thompson. And this is always that balance that a head coach has on, do you think you can help the person and how much help do they need, or when did they become to the point that you can't help them? And I think that's always a balance. That's one of the things where Philip Fulmer took a lot of criticism as a head coach because he gave guys too many chances sometimes. But there's also a lot of guys that because he gave them extra chances, it paid off for them as citizens later on. I think it's always an interesting balance a coach has to strike, not just based on his talent level, but also where's he going to be if he doesn't have football in his life? Can you reform him, so to speak, or is he kind of a lost cause?
I don't think that we're anywhere close to saying he's a lost cause. He didn't. From all that we know, he didn't lay hands on anybody. There was no physical violence, which I think is a very big deal when you're evaluating this situation, especially when there's a woman involved. So, there's going to, in this day and age, there's going to be some, media flack for letting the kid back. But I think it's the right thing to do. Football aside, if this kid was a, honor student in the chemistry department on an academic scholarship, would he have been kicked out of school and had his scholarship revoked over this episode?
Over breaking a gate and threatening?
I don't think so. We all understand the microscope that comes with being a scholarship athlete here, but I don't think we're, and I'm not saying Philip was right or wrong in some of these things, but think about some of the things that have happened over the years. Robert Ayers, just flat out knocking some guy out, staying on the team.
Tony McDaniel.
Well, now he did result in him getting.
Yeah, he got dismissed for sure. So there's always those lines
the big thing to me is no physical violence.
Right.
And I think that kicks it into a whole other category. If you slap a woman.
Well, I've thought for a while, and that the way we were trending was he was going to miss through Florida, which gets you the first 3 home games and the first SEC game. That's basically the first month of the season. You have the bye week that he kind of reacclimates. He actually is back out to practice much sooner than I thought he would be. But I thought the acclimation period would be the kind of that bye week going into Georgia.
I thought if the court,
which would be post court date.
Well, but I thought if the first court date hadn't got moved, then there would be a chance that he could be back out on the field and get an acclimation against Chattanooga and get ready to play in Gainesville.
I agree with that.
Is where I thought they were going until the court date got pushed back.
When that September 7th became September 23rd, it certainly seemed like the calculus changed a little bit because the trajectory has been on court date, and then we'll see what happens.
Right, and there was a thought process early on that the court thing would be settled in that first court date. It wouldn't be carried over to a later date. So we'll see how this thing unfolds over the course of the next couple of weeks with him on the practice field and how quickly he's allowed back to play, if he's allowed back to play when all that takes place. So he's not going to play on Saturday. The next question becomes Daniel Petulli. You want to get Daniel Petulli some reps because you don't want his first reps to be against Florida. You desperately need him on the field against Florida. He's not 100%. I think we can all say that and watch him on the practice field. So if you're Derrick Ansley and Jeremy Pruitt, what's your management for Daniel Petulli this weekend?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough because, they were doing some of the cut block stuff on Tuesday, and he looked he really kind of lingered getting off the ground. Then on Wednesday when we were out there, he did not do much at all. Started the practice on the stationary bike and then just kind of shadowed the rest of the guys when they went through some of the actual scheme stuff. The fact that Chattanooga may run some option, I'm in agreement with you. I think that in a perfect world, you'd like to get him some reps before Florida, but I wonder, maybe he plays a series or two, maybe. It was interesting that on Wednesday, Jeremy Banks only played 2 snaps against BYU, yet he was out there running with the first team with Henry, Toa. And, Pruitt's made it no secret that they want to kind of accelerate his development, and yet he didn't play much a week ago. A game like Chattanooga is a good opportunity for him and Henry T to run a lot together.
Well, and so maybe you just set Daniel Petulli for another week and hope that the knee gets better because maybe it didn't respond exactly the way you wanted it to this week. The feeling was, when this procedure happened,
10 days.
Yeah, Jeremy Pruitt
he didn't rule him out for Georgia State game.
Right, but he would definitely be back for BYU, and he doesn't look close to being back right now, Rob.
All we saw
from a movement standpoint.
Yeah, we just saw him on the stationary bike and wearing a very bulky brace on, an offensive lineman type brace on Wednesday, and we've all been around Daniel Petulli. If that kid can play, he's going to play. So the fact that he's struggling to get back to even where he can practice tells me that there's an issue with the recovery.
Yeah, it's taken longer than we thought. So maybe you don't play him at all. Maybe you just don't take a chance with him. If that's the case, then is this the Jeremy Banks experience? Is that what you treat? No offense to Will Ignott, but is this the let's rep Jeremy Banks as many reps as we can possibly rep, but because we feel like we need help at inside linebacker besides Henry T. We don't have a whole lot going on. Get Petulli back at some point. It's him and Henry, but then who's your third guy?
Yeah,
trying to make Banks your third guy because Shannon Reed didn't play last week.
No, and maybe you would like to have 4. Maybe the thing is,
I'm sure you would.
Right, like to have 4. So
I'd like to have 6.
Well, but they effectively only played 2. So maybe this is Banks' opportunity to kind of get the lion's share of reps. You kind of know what you have in Will Ignott. Maybe you use this as more of a management game for him because I'm of the opinion that this staff to date has not proven that whether they maybe poo-poo guys or not, they're going to still play some of these veterans. And I think Ignott is in that camp that until I see it, they're going to keep running him out there.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say I think Jesse nailed it, man. You know what you've got with Will Ignott. You're playing you're playing Chattanooga. Start to find out what you have in Jeremy Banks.
Which I know we're not talking offense yet, but which speaks to the same thing on the offensive line.
Oh, it's Ryan Johnson and these guys.
But this is the game where what you have in Ryan Johnson, so you need to get K'Ron Calvert some action. You need to get Jerome Carvin some action and some run.
I agree.
It's just the flip it.
I mean, look, Chattanooga's not as good as Georgia State, but that was the plan for Georgia State, and it didn't work very well. I mean,
yes,
you
but
can't
best
go
laid
back.
plans. I understand.
You can't go back in this world of playing 10 guys and rotating every other series or every series on the offensive line. When you get the game in hand,
absolutely
go that direction. But this idea of, hey, we're just going to randomly play guys whatever snaps we want to when we want to, probably not the best idea for this football team right now.
Agreed on all accounts there. But this is an FCS team. I mean, they beat ETSU 59-3 or whatever. I mean, they should still,
right.
Even with last year's struggles, they still handedly beat an FCS team. So the same thing should happen Saturday, which in the third and early fourth quarter, ideally, it presents itself the opportunities for some young guys on offense to really get some burn.
Well, and some, we've got to continue to get some. Look, I think you got to get a guy like Trayvon Flowers right. You got to try to get him right in this game.
Yeah, because he's been in a bit of a funk.
You're going to need him to help you at some point, and he was not very good against Georgia State and didn't play hardly any against BYU. You got to get him right moving forward because Theo Jackson did a nice job against BYU. I think right now he's your second best safety. Nigel's not setting the world on fire back there either. So
I'd say Theo's their best safety right now.
So I mean, I think you got to try to get Trayvon Flowers out of his funk and get him going in the right direction as well. So it's not just the first-year freshman that you've got to try to get moving in the right direction.
Right.
There's some veteran guys, who at some point you're probably going to need them somewhere along the way.
Aubrey Solomon,
DeAndre Johnson, maybe.
Yeah, okay? He played 2 snaps on Saturday.
Because are you going to ride your whole year playing Darrell Taylor and Crouch and Roman Harrison in straight third down rush situations only? I mean, at some point you're probably going to need.
Well, Bennett played a lot.
Kevon Bennett has had the role he's emerged in on this team is one of the biggest surprises.
Yeah, Bennett's averaging over 30 snaps a game.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing a lot. I think Roman's going to be a guy that continues to kind of chip away at some snaps. They clearly like Crouch in multiple of those rabbits and dime packages. Does his kind of role expand a little bit? We haven't seen it yet, but again, this is a game that perhaps he gets to try some new things as just kind of a standard, jack linebacker opposite of DT. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of kind of interesting storylines defensively with this.
All right, let me ask this question then. This game is the biggest for whom on offense and on defense? This is a big weekend. This is a big weekend for who?
Man, I mean, you hate to say this about your fourth-year junior quarterback, but I think Jared Guarantano needs to play well. I mean, for his own sake, to get some confidence.
He needs to have a clean football game where he throws 3 touchdowns minimum.
He needs to have a Derek Carr first half like he had Monday night. Oh, with 1 incompletion, 2 incompletions, 16 of 18.
And not force the ball into, not have 2 or 3 throws where you're like, man, what was
16 of 18 without dinking and dunking.
All right, then let's just go straight into Jared. Okay, let's do a deep dive into Jared here and not worry about what guy on defense necessarily has to have a big game here. Jesse, you had the piece on Wednesday regarding Jared and kind of what's wrong with Jared. Give what's the synopsis on Jared? What's wrong? How do they fix it?
Well, they're the ones that are getting paid millions to fix it, so that they're going to have to answer.
They're not on the podcast.
No,
so I'm going to ask you guys. How do
but
you fix
the
it?
straightforward answer is that he's regressed in A, what he's been best at all along, which is throwing off play action, and B, he's been particularly bad throwing in the middle of the field this year. And look, I mean, I wrote it. Jarrett's always had some deficiencies. He's never been a great guy at anticipating throws. His footwork comes and goes, but he's tough. And prior to this season and last year's game against Vanderbilt, he was mostly accurate. So he was accurate, tough, and risk averse. He wasn't gonna put your defense in bad. More of a manager. Wasn't gonna put your defense in bad situations. Would take a sack that you'd probably rather him not take. But he wasn't going to turn the football over. This year, he's turning the football over. Already has 2 interceptions, had 3 all of a year ago. Arguably could have had 4 or 5, if BYU catches a pass and if the pass interference penalty against Georgia State didn't get overturned. And then inexplicably, which again, this is what Chaney's going to have to figure out, why he's been so bad off play action throws. Those are throws that it's easier for the offensive line protection-wise. It's throws that ideally for a guy that, anticipation is not his best strong suit, makes the windows very clear and defined. And he's just been wildly inaccurate on play action. I mean, he hit Jawan on a perfect play that accounted for, basically half of his play action yardage on Saturday against BYU, and missed the same exact throw for really no reason. I mean, he never even looked at Jawan, even though it was the exact same coverage, did not recognize it. Tennessee ran effectively the same play of 4 verts against a cover 3, and that missed touchdown cost ultimately you go back to those points. That was the difference in the game. I mean, a year ago he was only behind Fromm and Tua as a play action passer in terms of returning quarterbacks coming into this season. Those are 2 guys that were on all the Heisman lists. That was why there was so much optimism about JG. And this year he's completing like 50% of his passes on play action. It's rather inexplicable, and the drop is jarring. Compared to yards attempt a year ago, 9.5 on play action pass. I mean, that's really good. Down to 6 this season. I mean, it's just
and the bigger worry is that you've not seen an SEC defense yet.
Yes.
I mean that's coming against Georgia State and BYU.
And they clearly felt like going into the BYU game, the thing to get him most comfortable was play action. They ran more play action against BYU than they did Georgia State, if I'm not mistaken.
100%. And they ran more play action, I think, Saturday than they had even. Tyson Helton actually liked a lot of play action, the Auburn game notwithstanding. And it was around 30-some-odd%, I think, a year ago off the top of my head. Chaney called 55% play action on Saturday.
And the irony is Tennessee was really good running the football. I
Right.
mean, those play action things, they had some bite in them.
Yeah, and the shots were there. I mean, he missed 2 of them. He missed Palmer on a touchdown. He misses Jennings. I mean, and that's just that's just what's kind of mind-boggling as to why, Jarrett hasn't been successful on such throws that, again, as a standard drop-back passer, that's never been his strength. This has been his strength because of his arm strength and ability to be accurate, neither of which have kind of showed up thus far.
All right, so if you're Jim Chaney, how do you fix him? What do you do? From a play call, I mean, do you take the middle of the field away and work outside the hash marks and try to work that more? Do you roll him?
I would.
Do you limit reads? I mean, what do you check with me at the line of scrimmage so you dictate the cover? You tell him what coverage is coming. What do you do?
I don't know what Rob thinks, but I would do more check with me's.
That was going to be my answer.
And I would say, I don't think you can say, Jarrett, you can't throw to the middle of the field. A year ago, he was completing almost 74.5% of his passes to the middle of the field. This year, it's down to like 60. If DWA is the playmaker they hope him to be, and Jawan is the guy that has kind of emerged as his favorite target, he's just got to be better throwing it, because that's where those 2 guys are going to do the most damage.
And Jawan especially can just, most slot defensive backs are not, most cornerbacks for that part, but especially little slot guys, he's going to be able to beast most of this.
Exactly, but I do think that, that they need to find a way to get Callaway the ball more involved down the field, and that is maybe some throws outside the hashes that he can kind of use his jumping and kind of muscle, ability, especially down in the red zone. Jarrett is not seeing the field well at all down in the red zone. It's not the greatest play in the NFL, but in college the fade works a lot.
Well,
bring back the fade.
And it's hard to take the fade away coverage-wise when you're inside the 10-yard line. You're not going to play bracketed coverage inside the 10. So I'm surprised, Austin. After that, I would contend that's one of Jared's 5 best throws this season was the fade to Callaway against Georgia State for the first touchdown, but yet they haven't gone back to it.
And that's Callaway's strength. He's got strong hands. He high points the ball.
He's 6'3".
And he knows how to use his body. He and Jawan both know how to box out, so to speak, as well as anybody. They just know how to use their body. Anquan Bolden was always great at that, and just go up and snag the ball out of the air. So, I agree. I think you've got to find ways to get Callaway more involved. I think JG just has such a comfort level with Callaway. And I'm not saying that Jarrett and Jawan have friction, but those 2, dating back to the Quentin Dormady days, were never just like super buddies. And so my point is sometimes I feel like Jarrett, especially these last 2 games, has been looking at Jawan a lot more than he has in years past, and so this neglecting Callaway, who he's always kind of had this good rapport with. Maybe that's just me. That's just kind of the feel I've gotten the last 2 games. When you look at a couple of the targeted throw where he throws the pick to start the second half, that was at Jawan. It's I don't know. It just seems odd.
Certainly seems like he's just not seeing the football field very well. How much of this is when Jeremy Pruitt's made it clear they don't have a backup quarterback? Nobody's pushing Jerry Garantano. I mean, for everybody who wants a quarterback change, that ain't happening because nobody is pushing behind him. But based on Jeremy Pruitt's comments at the quarterback club,
I was just making sure that the pick was to DWA.
Oh, it was the DWA.
It was the DWA.
Okay, so but at the quarterback club, he makes it clear he doesn't have a backup. Nobody's pushing Jared. There's no change coming. Same thing with the media. So how much of this is you just got to let him play through it?
Well, you absolutely have to ride it out. I mean, they don't. I don't. I know the fans are pining to see Maurer, but that ain't gonna work. That's just it's number 2 is gonna be QB1. They're gonna have to take the lumps and they're gonna have to find a way. I mean, I thought Callaway's comments were kind of vague, but at least interesting, where he kind of intimated that. I mean, clearly there is like a loss of confidence, not only with maybe the offense as a whole, but Jared in particular, and they got to kind of bring him out of that. AP used the word funk. I think that's a good phrase.
Fog.
They got to get him out of that, and they got to get him out of it quickly, which is why Rob and AP saying he needs a couple touchdowns this weekend. I mean, even if it is beating up on a patsy, they need to just feel a little bit good before they go face Florida, which could be down one of their top cornerbacks. We'll see. But it's an SEC defense that's going to have a whole bunch of pass rushers bearing down on them, right away.
I started to say, I mean, he's going to face a lot of pressure. I mean, his timing's going to have to be better. He's going to have to play at a faster pace against Florida than he has any game into this point. Let's talk about the offensive line. I don't want to knock on them, but also don't want to. I'm not anointing them in anything after 200 yards over BYU because I think BYU's going to.
Are you saying they don't have Larry Allen out there?
I'm saying Larry Allen's not out there, and some other All-Pro guys are not out there, but because BYU's going to give up a ton of rushing yards all year long. That's kind of who they are.
They did to Utah. I mean, and I'm sure Utah's better than Tennessee, but they were coming off a game where they gave up 260 plus.
Right. So that's going to happen, but. This offensive line did take some steps, created a pocket for him, seemed to be a little bit better. What's the next step for this line? What can you learn out of this line against Chattanooga, who probably doesn't, although they've got several guys in the NFL who played on defense, but they probably don't have NFL defensive linemen that you're going to play on Saturday. So what can you glean from Saturday for this offensive line? What should be their goal to accomplish?
I would play 2 different combinations, your main 4, and play Ryan Johnson and Locklear and figure out who your right guard is for Florida. Now maybe Calbert and Carvin wow you in the fourth quarter that you get a look there and practice next week. But my goal is that if you feel confident that it's Jameer at left tackle, Trey at left guard, Kennedy, and Tatum, find out who your right guard is.
You better know who your right guard is by the half Saturday afternoon for SEC.
That's my opinion.
Anybody disagree with that, or everybody on board with that?
I agree with that. More so in a broad sense, I think it's to be able to, establish and get a 3rd down and 1, get key short yardage situations. Something they struggled at times to do Saturday, and they've struggled to do for several years. But again, I look at this offensive line. That Saturday was to me a big step in my mind. I understand fool's gold, but the last few years they couldn't run for 200 yards against anybody.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where I feel like I don't want to diminish what they've done because I think it's pretty drastic compared to what they've done, where they've been in the years past. You're right; they're not going to be able to run off the edge against Florida and Georgia, Mississippi State. These teams that have really good defensive linemen and good speed off the edge. But again, a couple of years ago they were giving up sacks to Chattanooga right in there. The kid from Bearden rolls in here, and didn't he get 2? I mean, they've done a good job of having a decent pocket. They've been able to run the ball through 2 games. Because, I mean, really, I go back to that first game, 95 in the first half, and then they just totally abandoned it.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't really run the ball against Georgia State. They weren't great against Georgia State. Run the ball. Part of that, too, though, is just the bet. Chandler has taken his game to another level because Eric Gray's pushing him. Mm-hmm. So they have the running backs.
Which goes back to what Pruitt said all along, is we don't have enough quality competition across the board.
And so, I mean, they did block better on Saturday, but they also had 150 yards after contact because now they have 2 running backs that are pretty good.
Right, who are playing at a level that
Yeah.
they haven't played at, because as you mentioned, there's some competition there, for sure. They also got speed to get to the corner, where in years past they haven't had the speed to get to the corner at that position, because Ty Chandler wasn't dominating a bunch of carries a year ago. They trying to figure out how to use him last year. They haven't had.
And
some
he wasn't
speed guys.
as tough a year ago.
No,
he wasn't breaking. He was
he's
just
heavier.
he wasn't breaking as many tackles. And honestly, if one thing you watch the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Clemsons, part of the reason they're running backs now I know they're playing behind much better offensive lines, but part of the reason their running backs are
and
also
a more feared passing game.
But what I was going to say is part of the reason their running backs are so successful. Etienne's, Swift, those guys, you don't play at those schools at receiver unless you just block the hell out of people on the edge. And you watch those games, and they're pile driving people on the edge. And that's something that's a mentality that Pruitt and T. Martin are trying to instill with this group.
Something Juwan's always had.
Well, but Juwan's, but he's been inconsistent to start this season too. They have missed some. Pruitt said it himself on Monday. They've missed some perimeter blocks that a 9-yard gain could have been a 30-yard gain, or a 20-yard gain could have been a home run.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. They've got to block it better there, particularly moving forward against some defensive backs who are dudes that are going to come at you, safeties who are going to come downhill at you as well. So the takeaway from the offensive line is it was improved a week ago, and find your 5 this week.
Yeah. Just continue to take baby steps and find your 5.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I think that part of your short yardage woes is that you haven't found your 5, because I think right guard's been a struggle in short yardage, which is why the second 4th and 1 you ran wide. You tried to run it in around, because the first 4th and 1 you got manhandled up front. At right guard is where you got beat. So we'll see what they can develop and can grow out of that moving forward in a weekend where Tennessee should take care of business and get their first win of the year, and then we'll see what happens moving into the month of October with the open date and all the Florida, and then the open date and all those things. Let's talk quickly about recruiting. Noon start, not expected to have anybody much in the house this weekend.
Yeah, a lot of crowd.
Light crowd. They lost Lovey this weekend.
Lovey Jenkins, which I won't say Tennessee cut Lovey Jenkins. I don't think that's accurate, but I do think that they've not been as diligent on the contact with Lovey. So I think Lovey probably felt like
Satterfield's giving him a little bit more love.
Yeah.
So what's the story with Mordecai McDaniel? Is he just having some fun on Twitter with some of the Florida stuff he's retweeted or favored from months ago, and then he sends out congratulations to Lovey for making a different college choice? That those things get Tennessee fans kind of worked up. Where's things with Mordecai?
I think everything's same status quo. I've talked with him. He said he was just having some fun. You can say, well, it's easy for him to say, but I haven't talked to a couple other people. I think that he's fine. The thing about Lovey, man, all those kids congratulate her. I've not seen one that decommitted yet. That the guys that were committed in that same class didn't say, good on you, bro. Go get them.
Nobody's going to wish anybody bad luck on Twitter.
Yeah, I just think all those kids, they're all going through the same type thing as far as the phone calls and the process and all that. So I think they understand everything involved. So I think they're very supportive of one another, whether they end up here or not.
Jeremy Pruitt has told recruits when they've committed kind of where they are in the process, what the rebuild that they're in. But his speech to them in the rebuild wasn't anything about losing to Georgia State and BYU. It was getting to a bowl game and building forward. With phone calls being made now, coaches going out and evaluating and everything else, what's Jeremy Pruitt's and his staff's message to the committed guys right now? I get it. Stay true to us. We're going to be okay. Stay true to us. Everything's fine. How do you shift your message? What do you shift your message when you were selling one thing and it's not as easy to sell what you were selling?
I don't know. I'm sure some variation of, see, this is why we need you so bad. I wasn't lying. You can come in here. You see Eric Grade, you see Kavaris Crouch, you see Warren Burrell. You can come in here and play tomorrow.
But is the thought of that not what Rob said? My question overblown? Is it just about a relationship and not as much about the promise or hey, we're going to be this or we're going to be that? It's much more about the relationship that you have with them, and that's how you weather the storm.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I do think that's the difference for most kids, because kids are going to make an individual decision what's best for them. That could be opportunity, that could be a coach, so the guys that they have committed, I mean, they're certainly, I think Rob's point is very valid, that Pruitt has publicly pined that we need better players and we need more guys, and so that's what they're absolutely selling to not only the guys they have committed but the guys that are uncommitted. The question moving forward, I think, is less about what happens with the guys currently in the class, because the majority of them, I think, right now are solid.
But doesn't that get harder in October if it doesn't go well for the solid guys?
Well, I mean, you look, if you really went down like line by line, we'll see about a guy, maybe Mordecai, because he does play at a winning high school program. He's going to have. There's plenty of guys that are looking at Jarrett and some of his other teammates. But I mean, like the in-state guys, they're not going anywhere.
I
You know
agree.
what I'm saying? I mean, like some of there's a bunch of guys that I think that perhaps Jimmy Callaway is a guy, but like Tennessee was the one that took the first chance on Jimmy Callaway, and there's kind of that, you talk about that relationship and that loyalty factor there. Darren Williamson, kind of the same thing. Tennessee was the one that made the first move there. So I think there's less concern there.
And the other thing about Williamson is like it's not like Jimmy Callaway, I think, has probably picked up a few offers. Williamson committed, and it's not like they're just rolling in for him. I mean, to me, he's still very much, now that maybe you get 3 or 4 games on tape of your senior year, and all of a sudden here they come calling, kind of like Chris Russell did a year ago. But to this point, it's not like he's just got like a plethora of options.
So the question becomes, can you finish?
Yeah, can you finish, and what are your options depending on what happens over the next 6 weeks? I mean, AP and I have said this off the pod, but they need some of these in-state guys that keep kind of teasing that they're going to pull the trigger whenever. It would behoove Tennessee if some of those guys went ahead and jumped in the boat.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like Tyler Barron waiting on his birthday. I mean, I agree. I mean, Jay Hardy, get a couple of those official visits under your belt and see if you can somehow get him to pull the trigger sooner.
I'll also be curious if Tennessee, because of with its lackluster start, perhaps you're not in position or as well positioned for some of these 5 stars we've spent so much time about during the summer. AP, do they circle back on back around on a guy like Jacoby Cowan? He's the kind of guy that I'd be interested if Tennessee gets back involved with, because he's a guy that he doesn't have a ton of options right now. He'd like Georgia and Ohio State, but
will they take?
Will they take him?
Right.
So and it's just, he's just kind of the type of name that would be interesting to watch in October.
And for both school and prospect,
there could be a marriage there.
When I used this line the other day for something else, I mean, the Earth's getting bigger in the window. I mean, the time's running out here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're getting. I mean, if you're sitting there as a prospect and you've been waiting on a school and it's October and that school's not ready, you're starting to see signing days only, weeks and days away, not months away, like it was. So that changes.
Well,
some
I
things
mean,
there.
Jesse's huge word is always optics. And when you started 0-2, even if you can turn this thing and get it flipped around, maybe you say you get to 5 wins, which at this point I think you run with that at 0-2 with the 2 losses you have. Let's say you get to 5 wins, but you can somehow land Jacoby Cowan, who's a top 250 player, the optics of a 4-star. The other finalists, whether they take him or not. I mean, it's still when it rolls across the bottom line on ESPN, it's going to say Jacoby Cowan picks Tennessee over Georgia and Ohio State, because, I mean, that's what they're going to do. That's what these kids do. They're going to put those teams in there. So, I mean, I think the optics of some of those kids, it's like Jahmyr Gibbs. We watched him work out as over here as a defensive back. Kid just keeps throwing up huge numbers. And, I mean, like, if you like him at all, like, can you really afford to kind of slow play that one? Because, I mean, he's got, he's going to get more and more traction. He got Ohio State here recently as an offer. I mean, And again, where he's at in
You may
Dalton.
have waited too late on that one.
You're right,
You never know.
but I mean the point is like he's in Dalton, so it's not too far away.
Right.
And Georgia does not want him, so thus you're competing against. Maybe let's say Ohio State decided they did want him. That's a school further away.
Yeah, and then
up in the
Georgia
cold,
Tech, the fact
and
that
then
he's
Georgia
committed,
Tech is
yeah.
Well, the bottom line is whether they have 3 stars, 5 stars, 4 stars, and I know that's part of it with the optics, and if you get 4 stars, it might help you get somebody else. This program's got to go sign some players that can help you try to beat the Floridas, South Carolinas, get towards Georgia, get towards Alabama. But it's probably not going to be players that you beat Alabama and Georgia out for straight up.
Right.
And Clemson straight up head on.
Right, but I will say that it would behoove, and that's why it would behoove the staff and this program, I think, to go ahead and get some guys, because the Amari Thomases and the Darnell Washingtons and all those guys, they're not doing anything until January. Now, some of them may sign in December quietly, but they're not going to announce anything until January. So whatever happens with Tennessee's season is going to be done.
Right.
But the Lenneth Whiteheads, the Bryson Easons, these guys that current as of September 11th or 12th or whatever this is, they want to make a decision in the fall, and so those are the guys that I think Tennessee really needs to get on board sooner rather than later.
Lots of interesting things in recruiting. Tennessee will have obviously a bunch of prospects in town for the Georgia game. That's kind of the next big thing in recruiting. We'll continue to talk about recruiting, talks about some basketball recruiting coming up on our next podcast as well as that Georgia weekend shaping up to be a big weekend for Tennessee basketball. Last football question, we're out the door. Are you playing Crouch at running back in short yardage situations? Pruitt was asked about this on the teleconference. He didn't completely dismiss it. We haven't seen them work on it. Doesn't mean they haven't worked on it. Given where they're at, given the fact that he stood at a podium after the game and said, "Hey, we don't have a back who could do what the guy at BYU did to end the game," is there a chance they roll out there with some jumbo deal?
I would not be. The way Aaron Beasley's played 3 positions 3 different weeks, it would not surprise me at all if they just threw Crouch over there to give him a couple carries.
I mean, go back to the recruiting process. Play linebacker, have a package on offense. If you do that, then you're fulfilling your promise that no, I don't want to say promise because I don't know if that was promised, but that was talked about with him. You go back. So I mean, yeah, I would. I mean, like, what does it hurt? I mean, like, to me, and plus, I mean, like, again, if you're trying to pitch to recruits like you were talking about, hey, look, I told him this. He's playing a ton of snaps at outside linebacker, and he scored a touchdown Saturday.
Rob, they're 1 of 5 on 4th down conversions.
No brainer. You got to do something different.
Yeah.
And I think it's more about the 2 guards in the center than I do the running backs. But
are you saying getting the running back 3 yards deep and putting him down in the stance right behind a crouching Jared Garantano is not working?
No, it does not appear to be. But I would definitely look at Crouch. And I mean, I don't think that. I mean, how much practice time is it? Are you looking at taking him from outside linebacker? 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, a goal line deal.
You're not teaching him, pass protections.
Right.
Read the coverage. If this guy comes, you go out in the flat. I mean, you're just like turn, get the ball, and push the pile.
At this point, I'm for putting K'Ron Calvert back there and just telling him to push Jared as hard as he can push him with the ball snapped and go with the old Reggie Bush push. Maybe that gets you a first down. Whatever it is, Tennessee's got to figure out a way to convert 6 inches on 3rd and short or 4th and short, which they've not been able to do this year.
I mean, your quarterback weighs 230. Maybe you just have him lean forward at some point.
Somebody's got to push him from behind. It appears, but they've got to figure out a way to convert 4th down for sure, or short yardage for sure. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. For Jesse Simonton, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great Friday, everybody.